And I read something a while back from Dr. Christiane Northrup, a medical doctor who's written many books. This one, Mother-Daughter Wisdom. And this is what she writes. I lost my mother 4 years ago, and I sure do miss her. Mother-child relationships are one of the most intimate we will ever have, and often the most complicated. One of the most painful things I realized when my mom died was that I would never again be loved as unconditionally as a mother loves. Powerful, powerful for those of us whose mothers have gone on. And I really like remembering what we know together in unity. And that is that although, yes, we have loving relationships in our lives with our mothers, our parents, friends, family, within spiritual community, that love is in fact a concept that is much larger than any individual relationship. I love how we describe love. I love how we describe love in unity as the unifying, harmonizing power of the universe. The unifying, harmonizing power. In fact, some people, like Charles Fillmore, Buckminster Fuller, Phil Pearson, and Teilhard de Chardin say basically love is gravity. Anyone else have a spiritual mother that used to hold the earth and talk about how much she loved it? We think of gravity as being a very vertical thing. Holds us to the ground, holds things to the ground. But gravity is all around. It's that power that holds us together in families, in relationship, in community, and in our world. Thank you, Dorothy. If you want to read more about the concept of love as gravity, Phil Pearson has a new book out called The Metaphysics of Buckminster Fuller. And he talks about that, and that's what I've been reading this week. So if you enjoy that, it's a really good book. And of course, we all know that mothers are like a vortex of gravity. You know how in some families, the mother or the person in a mother role, people just seem to gather around. You ever notice that? And it's that gravitational pull of love. When we absolutely know we are cared about, it's a powerful thing that happens. And there's something about a mother's love. One example of this that I really appreciate is one we find in the Gospels. You know, Mary, the mother of Jesus, there are so many stories. And as reported there, her journey as a mother was not always an easy one. I mean, think about it. You know, in the book of Matthew, while engaged to Joseph, before they lived together, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit. Now, yes, we know there are different immaculate birth stories in many faith traditions, but in any era, in any time, that's no easy way to start motherhood, is it? And then in the Gospel of Matthew, after Jesus' birth, when Herod was hearing about a child born to be the King of Jews, and Mary and Joseph and Jesus had to flee by night to Egypt, that must have been terrifying. And aren't there moments of terror for a mother, at times keeping a child safe under all kinds of circumstances? And then what about the book of Luke? When Jesus was 12, maybe you remember the story. His family went to Jerusalem with a large group. They traveled there in order to celebrate Passover. And after starting the return journey, after a full day of traveling, they realized that Jesus was not among the group of children. Can you imagine the panic? They went back to Jerusalem. They searched for 3 days. And they found Jesus in the temple, and he was asking questions and making statements about theology. They were just shocked. They were appalled. And Mary said to him, she said, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety." And of course, a 12-year-old, he replies, "Why were you searching for me? Didn't you know I'd be here in my Father's house?" You can just imagine it. Shocking behavior, but the Bible reports he did go back to Nazareth, and he obeyed his parents. And his mother held all these things in her heart. All those experiences, all those ups and downs. Through all those times. Even when he was growing in prestige and power, even when he was kind of like a rock star. You know, he'd go somewhere and groups of people would follow him around and they'd sit all around him. And his family at one point, his mother and his siblings went to him because they were afraid. People were calling him crazy. And they went to him and they couldn't even get close to him because there were so many people just hanging on his every word. But they sent the word through the crowd, and the crowd told Jesus that his family was there. But he said, "Who are my family? Who are my mother and brothers?" And he said, indicating the crowd, "These are my mother and brothers, anyone who does the will of God." Well, that's a fine spiritual truth, but it must have been kind of humiliating, don't you think? Through it all, her love endured. And when he, because of his popularity and his power, was too much of a threat to those who were governing, found himself on the cross, he looked down and his mother was there. His beloved disciples were there. And he indicated, "Woman, this is your son." And to the disciple John, "This is your mother." And at his direction, John took Mary into her home as his own mother. That love never ended. And those stories continue to inspire people around the world today, thousands of years later. A mother's love, it never ends. Well, I've got to admit a little bit about my own personal story. I was the second of 3 in my family. Second daughter, middle child. So you know a lot about that already, right? I loved my mommy, and I wanted more. I wanted more time, I wanted more attention, I just wanted more. And it never seemed like there was enough. You know, my older sister was, a couple of years older, she was a busy little girl, and my dad, as much as he did for his family, he required a lot of attention. The attention that I wanted. And then another little girl came along, and oh my gosh, this is terrible. Well, you get on with life and you have your adventures, and some of them are happy and some of them are difficult. But my adventures meant I had a job offered to me. I grew up in Sacramento. I had a job offered to me in Modesto, so I moved back to the community where both my parents were born and raised. And it was there that I met my husband, Bob, and lived with him at his ranch called Promised Land Farm outside of Modesto. And if you haven't heard about Promised Land Farm before, it was one of the most fun free-range petting zoos I've ever experienced. Thank you, Bob. My mom grew up on a dairy farm, and so she had a wonderful feeling of home there too. And it was really nice because in addition to the little tiny original farmhouse that was on the property, there was also a 3-bedroom mobile home. So when they came to visit, and they came to visit often, they had a place to stay right there. It It was like a second home for them. We got to do so many fun things together. We were in the Graffiti Days parade, driving the 1960 Ford Fairlane my mom and dad gave me, and waving flags out the window. I mean, we had some fun times there, you know? And the time came when I knew I was supposed to go to Unity Village to become a Unity minister. And they were not pleased. They were not happy at all. I had been married to Bob for less than 2 years. And they were shocked that I would do that. They let me know how they felt. But I went. And then my husband Bob came to school too. And they came there for my ordination. They came for Bob's ordination. They visited us a number of times there. And no one was happier when we moved back to Sacramento in 2012. We got to host their 60th anniversary gathering at our home. And it was a very special time. And within a couple of months, my dad got really sick. And before we knew it, he was gone. Soon after that, my mom was back in Sacramento. And for the first time in 32 years, my mom has all 3 of her daughters with her on Mother's Day, because my younger sister moved back from Seattle too. So we're definitely going to be celebrating today. Yeah, I'm so grateful. And I'm grateful too, you know, that through all these ups and downs and some of the things I did that caused my mom great distress, and some things she did that caused me great distress, that we are enjoying life together. That we are doing things that I would have loved to do years and years ago. We're taking art classes together and doing crafts, and you know, and we're traveling to the ocean, and you know, going to flower gardens, all those things that are just nurturing both of us so much. Thanks, Mom. I really appreciated another story that I heard about recently of a mom. She was a young mom. She lived in Ireland. She did what her mom told her not to do. She hung out with those young teenage boys. She ended up getting pregnant, a very young teen. And in the faith she grew up in and the time she grew up in, there was so much shame. Not easy in any time or any area for this to happen. But she was sent off to a convent. And she was forced to sign over any rights at all to any contact with her child. And she was worked like a slave. But once a week she got to see her little boy, and she named him Anthony. And she loved her time with her little boy. And her little boy had latched onto another younger girl named Mary. And they were so close that one day, when a couple came to adopt little Mary, Anthony would not let her out of their sight. And quite unexpectedly, they took Anthony too, and they were gone. She was devastated. She loved her little boy. And she had to work there until she was an adult. And she'd left the convent at that point, and you know, she married and she had a family. But she never forgot about her little boy. And she'd go back to the convent and she'd ask them, she said, "Has he tried to reach me? Has he tried to contact me? Please, if he does, give him this information where he can find me." But she was always turned away. And in fact, she was told there was a fire that destroyed all the records. She had so much shame about this, she never told her family. But 50 years after his birth, when her husband had gone on, and it was just her and her daughter, the sadness was just on her. She couldn't shake it. And finally, she told her daughter what she'd kept secret all those years, that she had a brother. And as it turned out, an English journalist decided to help her to try to find her son. And they went back to that convent together. And there they asked again. This place where supposedly the records were all burned, they had one piece of paper, the one where she had signed over all her rights. Well, this journalist could not accept this. And while they were there in the community near the convent, they found out from some of the locals that yes, there was a fire, but it wasn't all that the sisters had said it was. And that there was a practice for decades of rich couples coming from America and the convent profiting from letting them adopt these children. Well, they couldn't get anything else out of the sisters at the convent. And so they went to America. And they found out a lot. What they found out was that Anthony was renamed Michael. His name was Michael Hess. He grew up in the Midwest. And in the 1980s, he was the chief counsel for the Republican National Convention under the era of Reagan and Bush. They also found out he was a gay man, closeted in Washington, D.C. His mom was not very shocked by that. She told the journalist, "I knew that from the beginning." And he was shocked by that. But they also found out that when she was there looking for him during those same years, he had made 3 trips to Ireland, that convent, to try to find his mom. And against the strong objections of his family, when he, like many other gay men of that time, died from AIDS, he was buried at the convent in Ireland. So if she ever came looking, she would find him there. Some of you may know this story if you've seen the film called Philomena that came out last year. It's also in Philomena Lee's book that came out in 2009. As a result of her letting the people know, if the world know her experience, there are so many other children and mothers who have found each other because that love has never ended. Some of them haven't found their family yet, but they're still looking. And she and her son, Anthony, or Michael, are inspiring us all. This mother's love is a power that we all can express, but it holds us together. It takes us through the years, and it makes wonderful healing possible. I'm grateful to be remembering this with you. I'm grateful for the nurturers in all of us. And I'm grateful and grateful and grateful and grateful for my mother and all the mothers here. Bless you, friends.